What is going on, people? Howdy. Let me know how the audio looks. It's been quite high. I'm going to try and turn it down a bit, maybe to about there. Let me know how it is. I'm trying a completely new setup. I'm mobile today. I happen to be in a hotel. I'm just staying away at the moment, getting some more work done on my book. So I'm not situated in my studio, which is in my house, for those of you who want to know. So I've got a bit of a mobile set up, but you're gonna have to tell me how it's doing. Give me some feedback in the chat regarding the audio levels. Let me know if they're okay, if I can be heard clearly, if the volume seems okay, if the levels seem all right. And once I've got some confirmation about the audio is okay, Rainier says, that's good. Okay, cool. Yeah, just once I've got confirmation and it doesn't sound too boomy and it's clear and it's all good, I think we'll just get cracking straight away. So to answer Mr. 2 Ernest Online's question, he said, damn, what could be worse than the IQ video? I think the IQ video was Bantu City Diaries. We're doing Franck Zanu again. I seem to be having a bit of a spate of these African anti-black content creators. I think I call them Babs, black anti-blacks. They seem to be getting a fair amount of traction these days. They're following the Jesse Lee Peterson model of basically saying the most disparaging and denigrating things about black people. But now we have, well, I would say now I think there are several Africans who have found this to be a lucrative path to follow. So they're kind of following in the footsteps of Jesse Lee Peterson, Officer Tatum, and doing their own African spin on it, you know? And yeah, I mean, Sibanar Keller says, I'm embarrassed by them. Well, you know what? I'm going to embarrass them as opposed to just be embarrassed by them. I think it's important. It might seem, some of you might see this as being somewhat time wasting, but I find that it's the same reason I do the Black Egypt research, and I provide that, and I provide the content around, you know, Black history that's been stolen or misappropriated elsewhere. The reason I provide the education is not to convince myself. I'm already convinced. You know, I have hundreds literally of books about my history and about, you know, our political situations, about our contributions. I know exactly what we are and what we've done historically. However, I feel like when these, you know, our entire simulation that we call life on this planet or on this plane, however you want to phrase it, is based on our reality, and our reality is based on what we're exposed to. That's what I think people. There's many different ways of interpreting that perception I've just given you, but essentially we're just a sum of the things that we're exposed to, and the things that we choose to believe is what ultimately becomes our reality. And if people are exposed to nothing but lies, then it becomes impossible for them not to indulge in a lie. They're going to believe in a lie. Their entire life is going to be a lie. You know, to give you a very simple way of framing this, why is the rate for, you know, people are religious. Okay, I'm not religious, but I'm not against people who are religious. But why is it that when you're born in, if you're born in Iraq or born in Saudi Arabia, your the percentage likelihood of you being a Muslim is going to be incredibly high. It's going to be through the roof. It's going to be an anomaly. In fact, if you're not a Muslim, the default is going to be you're going to be a Muslim. Okay. And you're going to believe in it. I don't think people who are there don't believe that that is the correct faith. I think they do believe that's the correct faith. However, if you was to take that person out of those surroundings and have them born, I don't know, somewhere in Western Europe, it suddenly drops on being a high percentage chance that you're going to be a Muslim to a high percentage chance that you're going to be perhaps an atheist. You know, and if you take that person out of there and then you drop them in the United States, or let's say the Bible Belt of the United States, it suddenly drops that you're going to be an atheist and goes through the roof that you're going to be a Christian. Now, I don't believe that the religions that these people choose is a reflection of their morality. I don't think it's a reflection of their intelligence. I think it's simply a reflection of their surroundings. Okay, it's just a reflection of their surroundings. And as a result of being surrounded by a certain, certain realities, they've chosen, and they've absorbed, and that reality has become their own reality. Now, I know this might sound like an entirely irrelevant digression from the purpose of the video, but the point of what I'm saying is if you only allow people to be surrounded by misinformation, you can't then blame them for believing in that misinformation. I guarantee you, everybody who was alive during, the height of slavery, for instance, weren't all just deplorable and evil. They were just surrounded by the information that told them that this was normal and it was okay. So the long story short is that we have a responsibility to correct misinformation when we're faced with it. And you can't allow people like Franck Zanu, like Bantu City Diaries, like all of these other self-haters who are out there to just allow their lies to just proliferate and to permeate, because they are getting more attention now than most of us get. His channel gets far more views than my channel gets. They get far more, far more people are sitting down and, feasting on the ignorance that they put out there than the correct, than the corrections and the truths. And that's why I'll continue to make this content. I think it's important that I counterbalance this misinformation with truth, with facts, and with logic, so that not only do people have a reference point to say, hey, look, I know this guy said this, but this guy said this, and this exists. But I think it also equips my audiences and people who follow my content with, grounded, logical refutations to this nonsense, because sometimes you don't have all the answers, and sometimes it's nice when someone else has just formulated a rebuttal to something that people says. And that's one of the reasons I did the, for instance, the IQ video. I did the IQ video before Bantu City Diaries did his one, and before all of that, I had already decided I'm going to do a documentary about IQ, because I knew what was being proliferated was false. And so I was able to gather the necessary research to say, this is how they got from A to B and B to C, and this is why it's incorrect, and these are the contributing factors. And I think that that stands as a piece that I'll be proud to give to people, to say, if anyone raises an argument regarding, Black people on IQ, here is a good piece of research, supported, research that you can give in response that they won't be able to refute. And that's the bottom line. When I make these videos, people aren't largely able to refute them. So yeah, preamble out of the way. I always start with a preamble. How many minutes are we on? We need 10 minutes in. That's more than enough, and it's enough time for people to be in the room. There's 20 of you in the room, so I hope there's 20 likes. I'm limited in screens. You can see I'm looking up there. I've hijacked the hotel screen, attached it to my laptop, and that's all I've got. So I'm very limited. Normally I have 3 screens when I'm doing it from my studio. So yeah, I'm very limited in terms of what I can see. But I just trust that you guys have hit up the likes if you're here. And we're going to get into a video that's been published by Franck Zanu. And when I saw this, when I saw the last few of his videos, there's a few of his videos I want to address. I realized something very quickly, and I might have mentioned it before, but there's a saying that a little knowledge can be very dangerous. I don't know who's heard that saying, and I'm probably phrasing it incorrectly, but it's along those lines of having a little knowledge can be very dangerous. And I know straight away some of you who are, well schooled in certain areas of, I don't know if you'd call it psychology, would talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, about how people who have a little bit of knowledge tend to be very confident in sharing that ignorance, and they share it so confidently it could almost sound like they're more knowledgeable than the person who's actually educated in that area, because they will share their views with a lot more caution and a lot more balance. And a lot of the time caution and balance is interpreted as being a lack of conviction by people who are onlooking, and not seen as because they're unaware that caution and that balance comes from the knowledge that the more you know about certain subjects, the less certain you are, because of how many different variables there are that play out. So Franck Zanu comes across to me as someone who is largely historically illiterate. He doesn't even have a rudimentary grasping on most aspects of history. What he does have a good grasping in is a particular period of history within the region that he's grown up around. So where I'd give him props is he has listened to the oral histories, and a lot of West Africans, I'll speak for, the ones that I know at least, tend to be relatively well grounded in their kind of immediate history between like now and colonialism, and maybe just pre-colonialism. They've got a good grounding of their ethnicity, where their kind of ethnicity comes from. But beyond that, he has very little, in my opinion. And unfortunately, you'll see he projects his history onto the African continent, and then he does a lot of guessing about world history, and 2 + 2 = 5 ultimately a lot of the time. So without going on any further, let's get into this particular video and see and see where we get to with Mr. Zanu. As you can, oh, by the way, it's quite late. Well, it's not that late. It's 10 o'clock. I was going to cancel this live, but I'm doing it. I've got a bit of energy. I'm going to see how far I get. And yeah, let's see how far we get into this one. So it's Black Pride. No young kid should hear this. That's what this video is titled. Black Pride. No young child or no young child should hear this term. He finds it offensive. Let's see why.
Hello, welcome to ZPR Zanu Project Refuting, and I'm Franck Zanu. Yeah.
Franck Zanu has been up there with the production quality from day one. This one, I know there's something very suspicious about the way this guy's just burst onto the scene with a very functioning logo. He's got a nice studio. Someone's definitely paid him to set this up, or either that or he was incredibly confident that his content was going to be consumed, because he's invested an awful lot into this setup. Guys, can you just let me know in the comments, when that was playing just now, was the audio level good? Was everything okay? I just want to wait till I get a bit of feedback from you before I let it carry on. Just give me some feedback immediately as soon as you hear this, and then it might be a little bit of a delay. But when you hear this, let me know if the audio of when he was speaking just now was okay. Did you hear it? Or was it silent? Did it work? Let me know. Audio is good. Okay, superb. Thank you, Dregger. Let's get going.
on something that I want to share with you, because I know some of you give me the best feedback, and I like it. So,
by the way, we're going to talk about his feedback there, because he said it, okay, and he said that it's kind of choppy. I think that might be the internet. Sounded stuttered for a bit. Could be the internet, but okay, cool. All right. You can see what he said just then was that you give me the best feedback, and I like it. This man, I've noted, lives for white approval. He really does. And when he talks about best feedback, if there's time, and I'm not too shattered, we're going to go through some of the comments in this video, and you're going to realize exactly what he meant by best feedback there. It's not the kind of comments that anyone with any iota of pride in themselves or their people would ever, take any kind of like, yeah, this is great. If people are giving me positive feedback, no, it's absolutely denigrating content or denigrating comments about him and his people, and he takes so much pride in it because they love him, just like they love Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse Lee Peterson has to be probably one of the, and I don't say this to throw any shade, just on actual observation, if you haven't seen him speak, he is very, very, very close to being, like, I think it won't be long till he needs help, and he's always been like that, to just function. He's very incredibly low functioning human being, and they praise him like he is the smartest, most articulate person on the planet because he says anti-black things. If he was saying anything else other than that, they would be going on about how stupid and how low IQ he is. But when you say the things that they want you to say, they will praise you, and clearly it works on individuals like this.
if I'm out of heat and I couldn't wait,
even that kind of like, if I'm out of place, if I'm out of line, just call me out. Okay, what's the point in that? Will you respond? Will you respond? Because I'll gladly call you out. Like I said, I'm putting my hand up now to have an interview with Mr. Zanu, and we can discuss your points of view online, because you are out of line at near enough everything you say.
To share with you, because I try to look at things objectively, okay?
And that's why he doesn't look at things objectively. He's literally one of the most subjective people I've come across, and his subjective view is always that the African perspective is deficient. So that's a lie. I disagree with that. I disapprove 100%. UFC fans will know that reference.
This is not quite funny at all. But please take a listen to this, and I'm going to play a short part of it.
Which is highest gene segment. The second race, I won't mention their color. They don't look like us. They're gene 6, 5. More intelligent. I love it. It is the fact that they denied for far too long that life began in Africa. They wanted to make sure, and every rock they could turn, and they still came back to the same place. Life, as we know it, began in Africa. Issue. But what they do is they don't want to bring it all out and make sure it's in our history books. But whose fault is that? We're still using the old colonial textbooks that intentionally eliminated facts that would have brought us up.
Now, before Mr. Zanu, audio's cutting in and out. Sorry, guys. I think it might be the internet. I hope you got the gist. Let me know if you got the gist of what the lady was just saying there. I hope you did. I'm not in control of the internet here, I'm afraid. So it might be. Is it? Let me know if it's bearable or if it's unbearable. I'll try my best to to work with you guys based on the feedback that you're giving me. But the gist of what the lady was just saying there, by the way, she is a doctor, a medical doctor. So she's qualified to make those statements. Now, I'm not going to. Now, the only one controversial thing that I heard her say there was that Black people are clearly more intelligent. Okay. I would say that that's, from the research that I've done, that's unquantifiable. That's unquantifiable at the moment. Okay. You could say you can have a hunch about it, but the relation, you have to answer the question if correlation is equal to causation. Now, the one thing that I can confirm, I can't confirm the gene segmentation. So she's talking about the fact that Black people have 9 gene segments, white people have 6. But the one thing that I can confirm, because there's only certain areas of genetics I've looked into, there are things that are absolutely confirmed. The first thing is that Black people have much higher heterozygosity than all of the non-Black races, basically all of the non-African races. We have much higher heterozygosity. Now, what that essentially means is that we have the evidence much more rich interbreeding. So between 2 individuals, you'll see so much more variation between the genes of Africans and everybody else than you will between groups that are non-African. Between groups that are non-African, they have, much less heterozygosity, and sometimes crossing over into homozygosity, which essentially means there's a lot of mirroring that takes place between when a man and woman breed. There's a lot more mirroring, and that's kind of evidenced in something. And don't let me lose you here, because I just want to explain this. That's evidenced in something called linkage disequilibrium, in which basically non-Africans have really long linkage disequilibrium chains, which essentially is kind of repeating patterns. So think about the fact that when your mother and your father get together and breed to produce you, something happens called recombination, where you get a gene from one location in the father's side, you get a gene from the same location in the mother's side, and they get smushed together, and you get 50% of the gene in the mother's side and 50% of the gene in your father's side. Now, that happens millions of times in every single individual, that smushing together of genes. What happens in a lot of European, or I should say non-African populations, is you have these chains of identical genes. So when mum and dad's genes get smushed together, no change occurs. The proof, damn, I can see it cutting out already. There's probably an Ethernet port in the room. Okay, I'm gonna go back. If it gets really unbearable, I might have to call this stream a day, and we could always pick it up another day, so don't worry. I'm gonna go back. So you have this thing called linkage disequilibrium, and that's basically, mum and dad's genes get smushed together to form new genes, and if they've got different genes, then your genes are going to be very novel. If mum and dad's got similar genetics, when those get smushed together, it produces the same gene. That's called linkage disequilibrium, when you have chains of these repeating patterns. Europeans have that in very high amounts. Africans barely have it at all. Okay, so there's, oh man, I can already see that the internet's not working well. This is a pain. Sorry guys, I can actually see now on my end that the internet's not doing what it should be doing. You know what? I could attach to my 5G. Wait there 2 seconds. I think we'll be able to resolve this if I attach to my 5G. Let me try that instead. That might work better. Mobile hotspot. I'm opening a mobile hotspot, and this might solve everything, guys. So I've opened a mobile hotspot. Let's see if I can connect. There it is. Okay, we're back and we're on the 5G now. So this should work. Okay, I don't know how many people I lost during that switchover. Okay, but this should work. All right. So so I was talking about heterozygosity versus homozygosity and looking at the genome, the different genome patterns that we see in non-African versus African populations, and the fact that they're much more closely related than non-African population. Now, a simple explanation for this is that essentially the non-African groups were formulated by waves of integration into Eurasia from Africa by various groups, small groups. So it would always be small groups that would leave and kind of like be responsible for what happened. And in Europe, there has also been a very recent spread and sweep of a single group that has kind of overtaken the continent, and then from the continent overtaken various other continents, being America, Oceania, and parts of Africa, that being the people who we classify today as white. They're from a very, very, very small and recently related group. Okay. Now, I'm not saying any of this to talk about any kind of superiority or inferiority, but those are provable genetic facts. I haven't said anything there that has not been backed up by multiple studies. Another truth is that I'm not sure about the 6 to 9 thing that she was talking about, but one thing I do know is that on average, Africans have about 20 to 25%, or is it 20 to 30? 20, I'm going to say 20 to 30, but I'm going to say 20 to 30% more SNPs. That's more markers, more genes. So we're more numerous in terms of our genes. And that's another fact as well. Okay, so there's much more diversity within a single African genome than there is within a single European genome. So all of these are facts. Now, am I going to talk about innate superiority, etc., etc.? I would be out of place talking about that, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know the relationship between these facts, that, Africans being more diverse, Africans having more genes, Africans being more heterozygous. I don't know the relationship between that and what the effects are on the population that's born out of it. So I won't make any of those arguments, but I will say that everything she said is uncontroversial, apart from the comment about the Africans are obviously smarter. That's just something that I would ask someone, whoever it is saying it, to qualify it. I'd say, how can you qualify that they're smarter? What's your proof? Okay. And when you make those kinds of arguments, people will inevitably ask for proof. Everything else she said, from what I can understand, is provable. And I would expect that, given that that's where she's qualified. She's qualified in the medical realm. So that's what I would say. That's my feedback on that segment that she gave us. That's my, objective viewpoint on this. Let's hear what Mr. Zanu has to say about this.
Now, it's a
very educated, in quotes, is more than what you are. So be clear about that, Mr. Zanu.
Education, yes. Dr. Arikana Chihombori moved out of Zimbabwe to the United States of America. She was stationed herself in Nashville, Tennessee, where she went to school. The white man's educational system.
Where she went to school, the white man's educational system. So first of all, is he classifying the university system as a whole as the white man's educational system? Because that already is fallacious. Okay, Timbuktu had universities when essentially Europeans were still grunting. Okay, Timbuktu was producing graduates and produced where a lot of what we get the modern education system from. The first secular subjects were taught in Africa, taught in Timbuktu, which is in West Africa. Okay. Before then, education as it existed on the Eurasian continent, Baghdad would be a good example of where they had similar kinds of schools, but they were all religious. Timbuktu was the first university to teach non-religious subjects outside of the confines of any particular religion. So you take subjects like, that was the first university where you could take Greek philosophy as a subject. Okay, and that's dating back to the 12th century. Right. So in terms of the education system, I hope he's not trying to phrase that as being the invention of the white man, because that's incorrect. Now, if the point is that he's trying to make is not that it's the white man's education, it's the fact that she's getting her university qualification in a white town or white country, a white nation, so what? What exactly is your point? What has that got to do with anything? Did you hear her say that there was something wrong with white people? Did you hear her say, I hate? Or no, she just simply said, Black people have these areas in which I believe they're superior. Now, you've taken offense to that because you don't believe that Black people should ever be able to communicate any kind of innate superiority on any level. Yeah? She shouldn't. That's what you believe. You believe they can't communicate any kind of superiority in any level. You know, only white people are allowed to do that, and that's why you've taken exception to it. So anyway, let's carry on.
To gain a bachelor's in chemical, of course, went on to medicine, a doctor.
Okay. Okay. I love the way he says things with a doctor. Okay. let's land this plane now, Mr. Zanu.
In around 2018, 2019, the AU, the African Union, made her a permanent.
Good choice. A pro-black representative in the AU. Good choice. It's more than what they normally do.
She took the white man's education.
It's not the white man's education. It's her education. Okay. She just said she took the white man's education. No. It's her education. She gained the degree. And I literally did a podcast literally just 2 days ago with one Dr. Onya Kanubia, who was forced to do his PhD thesis on 3 separate occasions for 3 separate institutions because of their aversion to want to hand out that kind of qualification for that kind of research to a Black or melanated student. They didn't want to give them. And that doesn't stand out. That's not like that happened in this case. It's like, no, this happens all the time. How hard Black people have to work to get, equivalent qualifications that they literally throw at white people. You wouldn't even believe. Okay. So for you to try and discredit her qualification by saying that she took the white man's education. No, she gained a qualification. She had to do that work. She did that research. It's nothing to do with taking the white man's education. Absolutely ridiculous statement. And shout out to Joy. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
In America, not in Zimbabwe.
And what's your point? Once again, what's your point? You can study wherever you like. That's one of the beauties of living in the modern world. Of course, you can study wherever you like. If she wanted to get her qualification from America, so be it. Because when she turns around, she gets her qualification. If her qualification was from Zimbabwe, you'd be the first person saying, they just probably gave it to her. She's clearly not very smart. So you wouldn't believe in the veracity of her qualification, of her degree, if she had gained it from an African institution. You are literally probably a contributing factor to the reason why she chose a Western institution to get her degree and her PhD from, or her MD, whichever it is she's qualified with.
To come up to that level, a diplomat. But she became the Jasmine Crockett of the AU.
And is that supposed to be a shade? The Jasmine Crockett of the AU. So you can already see the dog whistling here. First of all, Jasmine Crockett is far more educated than you, Mr. Zanu. So using her name as any kind of derogatory or slur shows how out of touch and how literally stupid you are. This is a qualified lawyer, okay, who has refused to acquiesce herself and to debase herself and to deny her heritage. And she talks with the language of her culture, something that you claimed her people don't have. And you use that as a means of discrediting her when you don't know anything about her. Like, what do you know respectfully about Jasmine Crockett for you to make that kind of statement? You're an actual idiot.
We never think
Sight in a situation where Jasmine Crockett has not thought before she speaks. He doesn't understand that a lot of that being attributed to her is just racial dog whistling, because they don't like to see Black people, in particular Black women, who are able to speak and who are able to articulate themselves clearly and speak out of turn, speak in a way that they find affronting. You're supposed to know your position. You're not supposed to challenge us where we stand. This is something you'll never do because you don't have the kahunas, respectfully, Mr. Zanu. You are what's called you are a doormat. You will say whatever you need to say for them to let you into the club.
By the AU. She blamed that it was the West that influenced the AU to kick her out. And she's gone insane, like Don Lemon.
Now she's gone insane like Don Lemon. So first of all, it was Jasmine Crockett. Now it's Don Lemon, and she's gone insane like Don. First of all, I didn't know Don Lemon was insane. This is a man who he clearly can see he doesn't have any moral standing. He doesn't have any moral fortitude, nothing. This is just a man who literally he picks his headlines from his comment section and probably from, the latest installment of Fox News. This is not someone who's operating any kind of original thought processes here. Very unimpressed so far.
Like Joy Reid since then. Now you've heard
what Joy Reid. I mean, can you hear him just throwing out the names? Absolutely ridiculous. Is he going to get to a good point here?
What you just said. This is what it's so funny that we don't know what to tell our kids so that when they are outside among people and people are talking about the accomplishment of their forefathers, their ancestors, talking about the accomplishment of their country, of their parents, meaning accomplishment, meaning innovations by the hand of their people, things that their people have done, created, innovated, built, established. We are the only ones who fail to have such conversations with our young ones, our children.
Okay, so there's so many errors he's got here. I don't know if Mr. Zanu's married or has any kids of his own, because when he talks, I feel like he can't have any children because the things he says are so ridiculous and so stupid. So first of all, I have those conversations with my kids all the time, and they're really easy conversations to have. Secondly, is the conflation. So let's not be distracted here, because this is what he does. Remember, I spoke about the fact that this man continually gish gallops. Okay, essentially, he's talking about one thing and then he talks about another thing. He just kind of like starts to compound and throw together all of his issues with the Black community. This woman just gave a speech about some innate biological differences between Africans and people who are non-Africans, or between Black people and people who are not Black. That's what she gave a speech about. Now he's started to talk about, oh, well, Black people, we're the only people when it comes to what the hell has that got to do with the speech she gave? Did she say, when my daughter comes up to me, I tell her this? Was that the purpose of her speech? No, she never raised that as an idea. She simply said, here are some innate biological differences that I can tell you with some authority because I'm qualified to tell you that these are some differences between Black people and other people. You're the one who's seen that as, it's because we've got no accomplishments to tell our children. No one's raised children, my friend. You're the first person to bring children into this conversation. Okay, the two things can be true at the same time. This is not one of those conversations. So you're raising the fact that she's saying this because she's got no accomplishments to share with her kids. Who the hell told you that? You already said she's from Zimbabwe. People from Zimbabwe, they're all aware of Great Zimbabwe. They're all aware of Mapungubwe. They're all aware of their history, and I think they're quite proud of their history. I think they're quite proud of their pre-colonial accomplishments, as are many other Africans. You're the one who seems to have this level of self-demonization, which is peculiar considering you're from Benin, and that was one of the greatest medieval empires in history. Well, clearly you don't take any pride in that because you don't understand your own history very well. But let's see what you go on to.
So they have something, they have nothing to tell them. You remember?
And this is what I was talking about, historical illiteracy. He has nothing to tell them. And so now he's trying to project that, and he's trying to make it sound like a symptom that permeates the entire continent. Oh, we've got nothing to tell them, like respectfully speak. And as I do often, I have those conversations quite effortlessly, actually. You're saying, oh, we got nothing to tell them. That's clearly because you believe the tripe that you put out, but it doesn't make it any more true. It doesn't make you any more knowledgeable. One of the biggest problems I have with Franck Zanu is that, irrespective of his age and trying to show people a bit of grace for being old or whatever, I always kind of like have that expectation that people reach a certain age, and as a result of reaching that age, they've moved into a degree of wisdom. They have some exposure to the world that I perhaps don't have that level of exposure. But the only kind of gist that I get when Franck Zanu goes off on one of his silly rants, and this is what this is a silly rant. The only gist that I get is of someone who continually speaks above their station about things of which they know very little about. He knows nothing about the subject that this lady is speaking about in terms of the genetic complexity of Africans in relation to our non-African counterparts. Okay, and he clearly is historically illiterate and knows nothing outside of slavery colluders in Africa. That's as far as his knowledge of African history goes back, and that's why he thinks there's nothing else to share.
The video I did, which I simply asked a question. I did not insinuate or at all stupid or dumb. No, I didn't. I asked a simple question.
Well, you're implying that right now, but let's hear the question that you asked.
To 3 young Gen Zs. Take people from other countries and ask them to tell you what makes them proud to come from where they come from. And I bet you, if they are Japanese, Chinese, Germans, Asians, Caucasians, Middle Eastern people, they will have something to say.
Well, that's an assumption that you're making there once again. And it's a huge assumption. And I would say it's a false assumption. If you was to go to a lot of British people right now and say, what makes you proud to be British? The only thing many of them would fall upon would be the British Empire, okay, which is not something to be proud of, something to be ashamed of, considering the atrocities and the genocides and the theft and everything else that was committed. And the other thing that they might be proud of is, ironically, the monarchy, the thing that we were trying to get rid of 40 years ago. Okay, so those are the only things that they would be proud of. And the monarchy, is that something to be proud of? The fact that you've had a family sitting on top. Now, Africa would be full of monarchies if they weren't all removed by the colonial powers. If the monarchies weren't all like killed or shipped off into slavery as they were, Africa will be full of monarchies. The oldest monarchs were on the African continent. Okay. In fact, I did a research piece on maps on my other channel the other day, and you can see some of the old maps. But if you look at the maps by Sebastian Münster in the 15th century, Africa is the only continent in which he depicts all of the kingdoms with a scepter and a crown. And the scepter had the kind of like the symbol of the fleur de lis, which they believe is French, but it isn't. It's an African symbol. And a crown. You didn't get crowned rulers in Europe, but you got them on the African continent, or at least that's what was depicted on Sebastian Münster's maps. And Sebastian Münster, as you can hear in the name, was a German. So then that raises the question mark as to why African continent was associated with monarchies and the European continent seemingly wasn't. Now, obviously, this is a question that's far too broad for someone like Franck Zanu to want to indulge. He'll come out with copes and ways of explaining around it or talking about why it doesn't really apply. But the issue, the overlying issue here is that Franck Zanu is historically illiterate. And so that's why he makes these broad sweeping statements, because he's never, I don't think he has an African history book. So there's no way he can have that conversation. So sorry, once again, going back to his point about the fact that you could just pick someone from anywhere and say, what are you proud of about your nation? Every person could give you that answer. Okay. Now, I don't know who he asked, but if he asked someone in the diaspora, that might be where the confusion is coming from. Because if you ask Nigerians, I'm sure Nigerians could give you a whole list of things that they're proud of, even if you didn't think they were entirely relevant. And even though they've got the most horrendous leadership right now, there's plenty of things that you could be proud of being a Nigerian, being proud of being a Ghanaian. And you really have to go back to history in terms of these nations' modern contributions. Now, if you asked a Nigerian who lived in the UK, for instance, who wasn't schooled up on Nigeria because they live in the diaspora and they live in essentially as an ethnic minority in a foreign nation, that's where you might get some question marks and people might be stumped to be able to answer your question. They might not have even fully understood your question, particularly if you're talking to, an ethnic minority in a Western state. So these are the different, this is just called, having controlled environments when you're making broad sweeping statements like this, making sure that you're asking everybody analogous questions. So you're asking this person, so you're making sure that the question you ask this person is interpreted the same as the person that you ask from over here and the person you ask from over here. Make sure that you have a controlled environment. What you do is you like to gish gallop and then trip people up. You like to go to Trinidadians. Was it Trinidadian? No, you like to go to, Haitians who live in America and you ask them to explain Black American culture to you. And then when they can't give you a straight answer, you go, oh, see, that's proof they have no culture, because that's what moronic people do. They trip people up. They look for gotcha moments. They gish gallop. They confuse people and they look for the outcome that they're after. And they deliberately avoid the people that are going to give them the kinds of answers that contradict the kind of message they're trying to put out, which is what he does.
And I asked them, if you were the only Black person, what would you say? And that video went viral.
So I haven't seen this video that he's talking about, but what has their Blackness got to do with the question that you asked them? You just said, what would you be proud of? And now you're talking about what would you be proud of as the Black race? Like, this is a ridiculous, you do, see, I don't think Franck Zanu understands that, race is very much a social construct, okay? There's so much diversity. I mean, you're from Benin. You are Benin Noir man, like you like to say over and over again. As a Benin Noir man, you should know that there are scores of ethnicities in Benin. There are hundreds of ethnicities in neighboring Nigeria. So what are you asking them? They're probably confused, okay? What you're asking, because you're asking them to think about something that all Black people have achieved. That's an impossibility. You do realize that. If you was to ask white people the same thing, what's something that you're proud of being white? The only answer they could probably give you is slavery. You do realize that, because that's the only thing they've achieved as, universally as white people. That's the only thing that was achieved as white people. Now, if you was to ask, like you said, a German, what are you proud of being as a German, or what you're proud of achieving as a Scotsman, or what are you proud of achieving as a Russian? That's a completely different question to what are you proud of achieving as a white person, because then you have to think about something that you've achieved together as an entire group. So I can already see, I haven't even seen the video, but from the way you're phrasing it, you sound so confused in your delivery. What kind of response was you expecting to a question like that? It shows a massive degree of either ignorance or deception on your part. And I think it's a mixture both.
Mentioning exactly what this in this country is saying. Things that we did not create, natural resources, some people said.
That's the reason. And see, this is the thing about people who are stupid. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to insult him, but this is the thing about people like this who, the reason they said things like natural resources, once again, is because you weren't specific in the way you asked the question. The way you asked the question created confusion and conflation. If you asked an individual from a particular ethnic group, what are you proud of about your ethnic group, then they could draw on the references of conversations they perhaps had with their parents, the history they've learned in school, the things that they see around them, the cultural cues, the things that they do as a people. Every people, regardless of what ethnicity they're from, have got things in their ethnic group that they're proud of. Even, even groups that don't exist anymore. One of my good friends in high school was a Syrian. As you know, Syria doesn't have a country anymore. And they laugh about the fact that that was God's judgment that they don't have a country anymore. But they still have a very rich culture. A lot of Assyrians tend to be Christian. I think there's a few that are Islamic, but most of them tend to be Christian. And they're very, very proud of the kind of like their culture. And this is a nation that doesn't exist anymore, okay? But yet their culture exists, it lives very much like any other culture, If you was to ask that question to a Jamaican, if you was to ask that question to a Grenadian, if you was to ask that question to a Guyanese, if you was to ask that question to, and like I've said already, a Yoruba, an Igbo, all of these people, their cultures are very tangible, very rich, very thick, and they could tell you loads of things that they were proud of. You confuse them by bringing race into it, and when you ask a you've heard the old adage, if you ask a stupid question, you'll get a stupid answer. Yeah, everybody has heard that old adage before. So if you ask someone a stupid question like, well, what are you proud of? What are you proud of as Black people for achieving? The only thing that Black people can be proud of as a collective is our unity and our resistance to the modern oppression that we face as Black people, because Black is not a real group. Okay? Black is not a real group. We didn't all wake up. We didn't all decide we're going to be Black. Black is an exonym. Okay, and to explain, an exonym is a name that has been placed upon us from the outside. We've chosen to draw ranks and to be proud of our Blackness in resistance to oppression. That's why pride in Blackness exists in its modern state. And that's why if you were to ask someone, what are you proud of as Black people, they're going to look for our biological affinities. They're going to say, well, as a Black person, one thing I might say to you is, oh, well, as Black people, we we can go out in the sun and we can enjoy it and not get melanoma. Okay, yes, that's true. We can do that. We accomplished anything for that? No, we came out of the vagina and that was the thing. Yes, that is not something that we should be proud of, but that's the only thing you can be proud of as a race is biological things. Do you not understand that? You live in, use your brain. When you're asking people what are they proud of, that in terms of what their race has achieved, the only thing that links us together as a race is our phenotype, is our biological phenotype. If you want people to give you qualitative answers in regards to what they're proud of in terms of their culture, you have to ask it in specificity to their ethnic group or to a geographic region. That's not difficult. And you're sitting there, look at this smug frame I've got him frozen on. He's sitting there with that smug look on your face, like your stupid question to what it sounds like these children was see, you got nothing to be proud of, you stupid Black African. Like you're the stupid one. You're the stupid one. And the thing about it is you can get away with these silly little tricks with your sycophantic audience and people who don't know better. But if you're in front of someone who has an iota of education, they would take you to task because you are historically and it seems socially illiterate.
Black people Our
Oh gosh. I lost internet again there, guys. I don't know why. Let me see if I'm still on my Android. I am. Oh no, I'm not allowed to use that word tethering, am I? I'm tethering, guys. I'm tethering to my phone. Some of you in the chat will be like, yeah, you are tethering, man. You need to leave us alone, brother. No, I'm using tethering, the original, well, the pre the pre 2024 interpretation. Yeah. Darn. Okay. I lost internet a bit, but I think it's back now, guys. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to bring it back a few seconds as well. Let's bring it back a few seconds. There we go.
She said, what, number 6 or something, in that we are far intelligent. The genes we didn't create is what is left for a doctor, a representative to the United States, to claim to be our pride, something.
Well, she never said that. So once again, this is what he does. He's taken her fully out of context and he's making claims that she never made. She never said anything about this is something that we need to be proud about. She never said this is something we need to teach our kids. She was simply saying this is a biological fact. Okay. She never said that she never said this makes up for the fact that we have no accomplishments. All of that is simply what he is literally, projecting onto her speech. She said nothing of the sort, nothing of the sort. And he's going to build his entire argument around it because he's so disgusted that a black person would have the nerve to point out the fact that there are biological advantages to being black, to being African, because he sees it as deficiency. And he's so annoyed by that now. He has to try and project things into her talk. This educated woman, this woman is more educated than him. In fact, every black person he's mentioned is far more educated than him. And he's sitting there trying to deride them, go figure.
We didn't create. Oh, you thought she would stop with the gene. No. The birthplace of mankind.
Oh, come on, man. Sorry, guys. Even my 5G is playing up now. Don't know why. It's really annoying. I don't know why it's playing up. It was just loaded in there. Anyway, while that's healing itself, I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Dregger. Thank you very much for the donation. He says daily wire levels of strawman attack. Absolutely. I think him and Ben Shapiro, oh my God, they would have a field day. Oh my God. And this is what he's aiming for. He will be doing the rounds soon, probably like Professor Zhang. Not saying Zhang is like him, he's not, but I'm saying in terms of his popularity and his notoriety, because what you find is all the people who need that kind of, need an affirmation from a black person who hates black people, they're going to be fighting to get him on, which is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, the point you just made there about genes being the birthplace of mankind, I mean, Africa being the birthplace of mankind, that's just science, okay? That's anthropology. It's proven, it's not debatable, and it proves that this is essentially, where do you not think the other way around that Europeans would celebrate that? They were very disappointed when they found out that essentially there wasn't kind of like these I can't remember what it's called, basically multi-ethnogenesis. There's definitely a much more shrunk down word, but there were many scientists, or at least eugenicists and scientific racists, were hoping to find that the different races of mankind had different birth points, because then that would really justify their oppression of black people during the early 19th century, when it was kind of like reaching its height and they were using scientific racism as justification. So they were really looking for this evidence that we're different beings birthed from different places. That would have given them the rubber stamp to essentially do whatever they liked with us, because then they could say, well, we're humans and they're not. Now, they never found that evidence. The only evidence they've ever found is that they represent a tiny subset of our diversity, of Black African diversity. So once again, her pointing that out, what is the issue with that? What is the issue of her saying all of mankind comes from us? It essentially makes us the mother and father of everybody who's walking the planet right now. They come from our genetics. They come from our group. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Once again, I wouldn't teach it as something that my children need to be proud of. However, I would teach them that it's the truth, and I would teach them that it exists as a biological reality, so that when they go out into the world, and the world inevitably will try to, undermine and devalue their kind of capability as human beings, just like they did with the whole, seavid hoax, when they turned around and said that we were more susceptible to catch it and die from it, which is a load of nonsense. Or like when they lie about the fact that we contract melanoma at higher rates, when we contract it at literally 100 to 200 times less, and we don't get UV induced melanoma. That's a whole nother discussion. The only form of melanoma we get has got nothing to do with sun exposure, and yet they got all these Black people wearing sunscreen because they're uneducated about our biology, and they trust in the Western media. All of these things feed into the same thing. Yes, we need to teach ourselves and teach our children about the biological nature, the biological truths, the origin of mankind. All of these things have importance, and you trying to negate that doesn't change that fact.
The Garden of Eden. Do you see? I really want you to take this seriously. Black people have nothing they can tell the world they have done.
That's what do you say to a statement like that made so bold? Black people have nothing they can tell the world they have done. Black people have what can't Black people tell the world they've done? I don't think Franck Zanu knows that the gift of writing was literally a gift from the African continent to the rest of the world. The rest of the world would not be writing if it weren't for the African continent. Okay? All of the writing systems that are used throughout Europe and Eurasia descend from the ancient Egyptian writing system, which itself descends from the Ethiopic writing system, if we're going to take the words of Diodorus of Sicily seriously. So the order goes: writing began in Kush in pictographic form, which is the hieroglyphs, which was then inherited by ancient Egypt. Okay, still in Africa, the hieroglyphic form, still Black people. Okay, which then evolved into hieratic and demotic scripts, which were the shorthand versions, which then gave birth to a Phoenician script, which then gave birth to Greek, Etruscan, which then formulated over time into Latin, etc., etc., etc. Writing in all of its forms on the European and Eurasian continent descends directly, not indirectly, directly to the African continent. And that's not to mention during the time of the Moors, like someone just mentioned there, the fact that writing was then actually writing, education, all of those things that we take pride of today were literally, given their importance by Africans. Africans made these things important to Europeans who weren't using them. The University of, the city of Timbuktu was a major book producer in the medieval world. And by the 15th century, before the invention of the printing press, they would produce annually more books than Europe produced throughout its lifetime. And this is a verifiable fact that Europe produced somewhere between 40 and 50,000 books in its entirety, manuscripts. When I say books, I mean manuscripts. So written documentation only numbered 50,000 up until the point of the invention of the printing press. Annually, the city of Timbuktu would produce about 500,000 manuscripts. That's 10 times the amount in a year than Europe produced in its entirety before the invention of the printing press. Yet you're going to turn around and say with your full chest that Africans have contributed nothing. Africans produced were working metal before the European continent, irrespective of what you might believe. The word for iron used in Europe comes from Yoruba. A lot of people don't realize that. It's a Yoruba word that we use for iron. Okay, and it doesn't come from Indo-European Isan, that's made up. It comes from Yoruba Irin. Okay, we brought that word over sometime in between the 10th and the 13th century. There are things that would blow your mind if you bothered to pick up a book and you bothered to learn anything. You know, even if you talk about things like architecture, you know, colonnades, columns, pillars, they come from the African continent. They were brought into Europe. Okay, Europe wasn't using that kind of architecture before it was brought in. There's too much to go through at this stage, but for you to make such ignorant statements, and that's just going back through ancient history, we could talk about more modern history as well. But that's not why I'm here, to give an entire history lesson. But the fact that you could once again make a statement like that just proves that you are historically illiterate. And that's the problem. You don't have the grounding, you don't have anything to make these kinds of statements that you're making.
Every time you ask, they only go to things that they did not create. Genes and the place where humankind came from.
Well, that's not, because you never asked her that question. If you asked her that question, she would probably give you more than I've just given you in that little 1 or 2 minutes when I was going over those various things. You could ask many Black people that question and they will give you the answers that you're after, but you don't give the opportunity of that. You prefer to gish, gallop and blindside youths with stupid questions, loaded questions of which they can't formulate an answer because the question itself is deficient and stupid, and then turn around and use that as proof that Black people have no idea what we've contributed in this world. That's your own perspective. You're projecting your own self-hate.
You ask, which African tribe, which African country, which African people, or which Black people created that place? And how did they create it?
This is coming from a Benin Noir man. His country is literally named after one of the greatest medieval, going back into, you know, late antiquity, empires that ever existed. A gigantic walled city whose the wall that used to surround it was in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest earthworks project ever conducted in human history. A massive, massive feat. I think it was, can't remember what the exact length was. I don't want to say it wrong. I feel like it was 9,000 miles or something like that. Okay, so 9,000-mile long wall that used to encircle the city. They call it the city of Benin. The Ober's Palace was said to be so grand. It had, I think, 20,000 occupants in the Ober's Palace. So the Ober's Palace was basically a town, and the Portuguese described it as being bigger than one of their biggest towns. And that's the Ober's Palace. Okay, these are things that are written. This is documented history. This is readable, even though a lot of our history was burnt or stolen, brought over in the form of the Benin bronzes that sit right now inside the British Museum and in private collections. A lot of our history was actually stolen, but this is a man whose country is not exactly the same place, but it's named after that civilization and that empire, which was known to be great. No one argued about the greatness of Benin, whether or not it did or didn't exist. But you're gonna sit down and make that kind of argument with a straight face. Once again, you are historically illiterate.
This is what we are left with. And the world is laughing at us.
At you, my friend.
That a whole medical doctor would claim two things that we did not create. And guess what she said? That if the white people acknowledged it and kept it in the history books, the white people's history books, not African people's history books. No one has stopped the African from writing his own history books. Because nobody stopped Wole Soyinka from writing.
Okay, this guy's clearly a moron again. So first of all, he's made the statement that no one stopped the African from writing down history books. The problem is we don't have a lot of African history, ancient African history, that is. We've got modern, and by the way, people are writing, okay, even before Wole Soyinka. We could talk about Sheikh Anta Diop, who wrote several history books, some of which are some of the greatest history books that have been written. Okay, Pre-Colonial Black Africa is one of the books he wrote, and that was, before Wole Soyinka started writing. Okay, these are mid to early 20th century books, okay, that were written by several scholars. We even go to America and get writers like, W.E.B. Du Bois, and other writers who have written lots and lots of history books about Black and African history. So yes, we have been writing our history, but if you're going to go back as to why more of our ancient history, I talk about the University of Timbuktu, and the only reason we know about that is through the writings of Al-Zayati and Leo Africanus, because the actual manuscripts had to be hidden, because the colonizers, the people who came, the Europeans who came to colonize, their policy was to burn all African books, artifacts, was to leave no trace of African civilization. Their policy was to deconstruct any building that was higher than 2 stories high. These were the policies that they had in place. Okay, now a lot of this was hidden because of Operation Legacy, but we know the remnants of it because the only surviving manuscripts the only reason we know that Timbuktu library existed is because the manuscripts were hidden in private libraries. So those 380, 400,000, I think, or so manuscripts that have been preserved from the Timbuktu library were all collected from different private holdings, okay? Different private families who held onto these. Otherwise, these wouldn't exist. And if these manuscripts didn't exist, everyone would say the library never existed because there's no evidence of it. It's been deconstructed, it's been burnt down, it doesn't exist anymore. Now, some people will say, well, that was because of the invasion by Morocco. But the Moroccan invasion, I don't believe, was responsible for the destruction of the manuscripts. That was colonialism that did that. Now, you would turn around and say, oh, why weren't Africans writing their own history? And yet the evidence suggests that they were not only writing their own history, they were writing for the rest of the world, because Timbuktu was the biggest exporter of books in medieval history. Timbuktu was the biggest exporter of books in medieval history. Oh, and by the way, do you know where they used to get the leather to bind the books from? Nigeria. Nigeria was the biggest producer of leather during that time when Timbuktu was exporting books around the world. Nigerian leather is some of the highest quality leather you would find in the world. The paper they would get from Fez or from, what's that Italian city? Not Napoli. I always think Napoli. It's not Napoli. It's another one. I can't remember. But an Italian city. That's where they would get the paper from. But the leather they would get from Nigeria. Okay, and they were exporting books globally. Like I said, to the tune of about 500,000 books a year. The books weren't all in Arabic as well. They were written in a Jami script. Many of them were sold to surrounding African nations. Venice. Thank you very much, RJ Mackenzie. Venice was where they got their paper from. So it was either Fez or Venice where they used to get their paper from. And they were the biggest, obviously the biggest purchaser of paper. They used to literally uphold the paper production markets in Venice just by the amount of books they used to produce. Now, we only know this because of the preservation of authors who were not African, because the African manuscripts and the African evidence was destroyed. And if it wasn't for the ones that were held in private libraries, we would have no evidence of this. And they would say, oh, well, Leo Africanus, Zayati just made it up. We wouldn't know that people like Ahmed Baba existed because the evidence that was on the African continent was destroyed. We have evidence of that because otherwise it would be here and it would be in our hand. So you speak right now, yeah? You speaking right now with so much authority that nothing has been created. Once again, it just proves your historical illiteracy. You're not in a position to have this kind of conversation. To Trigger, who said the same policy they employed everywhere we were. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The policy of deconstruction and destruction to hide, obfuscate the evidence of any kind of Black capability for civilization. That's a very, very important part of enslaving and subjugating the melanated race. That's one of the biggest parts, is to say, okay, we have to prove that these people are not capable and therefore there's no crime that's being committed in putting them in this place of enslavement. Absolutely correct, Jigger. And if you're appreciating the work, guys, don't feel shy to leave a super chat. I told you it's late and I did this anyway. So if you're appreciating the dialogue and the discourse right now, 54, make sure you hit the like button and also consider leaving a super chat. Let's carry on.
Village stories as literature to the point he got a Nobel Prize for it. Nobody stopped Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, from writing those brilliant books. Nobody stops Ngugi wa Thiong'o of Kenya from writing Weep No More Child, or Weep No, yes, the river runs through, the stream runs through. Nobody stopped Chimamanda Adichie from writing Half of the Yellow Sun. So how come we have not written our own history books to include
But who told him that we haven't written our own history books? Once again, he makes these assumptions and he says these things with so much authority. How does he think people like me know our history? How does he think the people in the chat right now know their history? We know our history because there are several scholars out there writing African history. I'm writing a book right now. That's literally why I'm in this hotel room today. So he's making all of these really strongly worded assumptions that are just patently false. They're just patently false, you know. If you're getting heated by his silly talking points and wondering why I'm suffering this buffoon, I think it's good. I think it's good that we can watch this and we can laugh at him together. It's important that we laugh at buffoons like this together, because there are too many people who take his words seriously, but also find it hard that they find it difficult to formulate why they're feeling that way. Fortunately, I don't find it difficult. And so I'm happy to sit here and I could literally go through every single one of his videos and tear them to shreds, because the guy has, you know, he has nothing to support his arguments. He's just one of these, and once again, just like Bantu City Diaries, these buffoons who, because they possess a degree of eloquence, and I will say a degree of eloquence, I'm not going to sit here and say he's not, you know, relatively well spoken. He's clear, and it does take a degree of talent to get in front of a camera like this and to diatribe, particularly when you're saying such nonsense, but it still takes a talent to do that. So I'm going to acknowledge his talent in that area, but it's good to, you know, essentially debunk and refute what he's saying in an educated way, so that people aren't left confused or thinking that he has a point, because he absolutely does not.
The tribe, the nation, and the project managers who led to the creation of the Garden of Eden. Why haven't we written that?
I mean, even that, I'm sure if you turned around and you was to ask Mr. Zanu, where are the oldest manuscripts of the Bible from? You know, I'm sure he would, well, they're all from the African continent, okay? The oldest complete manuscripts are obviously the ones that are found in Ethiopia. Okay, so the Ethiopian Bible has the oldest complete manuscripts. And if you could talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found in and around Sinai. Okay, so we're talking about bordering Africa. Probably could be found on both sides if you looked close enough. But so we're talking about really concentrated in and around the African continent and Sinai, which is just kind of like creeping into a place we used to call Africa, but we no longer call Africa. So even if you're talking just biblically, by the way, just biblically, and by the way, I wish I could tell you guys what the Semitic scripts were. I will be talking about that very soon in the near future. But even if we're just talking just biblically, even these things that he has so much pride in, why didn't they talk about, you know, the project managers talk about, you know, it being Africa, this, that, and the other. He doesn't even realize the scripts themselves. Okay, he doesn't even realize the scripts themselves are largely associated with the African continent, because he's disconnected himself so much from the probability that any of this stuff has got anything to do with Africa. And that's the problem. Once again, like I said, he's not ready to have this conversation.
2, why must the white person acknowledge it for you to be empowered according to her.
See, and this is where it's really funny as well. When he keeps talking about white people, and he never expresses the fact that the entire Western Hemisphere is practicing let's call it Afro-Asiatic, to avoid controversy, an Afro-Asiatic religion, okay, in Christianity. That's an Afro-Asiatic religion, okay? Judaism, Afro-Asiatic religion. Islam, Afro-Asiatic religion. The entire world, basically, apart from the East, is practicing Afro-Asiatic religions, okay? Religions that have as firm a footing on the African continent as they do in the Middle East. Languages that have been established to have begun in East Africa, okay? Being the all of the Afro-Asiatic language film. So he's saying that, oh, why do we need white people to confirm us? Like, well, why do white people need our religions to confirm anything? Did he ever figure that out in his brain? Okay. And all of you guys in the comments, I could talk about, the appearance of Jesus, the appearance of Muhammad, and all of these people being described in their own religions as black men. I don't need to go into all of that right now. Just talking about factually what we know. No, we can prove those things, but factually what we know is that these are Afro-Asiatic belief systems, okay? The names of their gods are reflected in African religions. So it keeps talking about all of these things and making these assumptions. This has got nothing to do with white people. Christianity has nothing to do with white people, zero to do with them. But he will never be able to even conceive that perception.
If only they have kept that in the white man's history books and acknowledge it, that we black people, we are the most highest intelligent people because we have number 6 or 8 gene, and also that all mankind came from Africa. That, according to her, would empower us. But because others refuse to acknowledge it, like when people refuse to acknowledge the mere existence of Jewish people, did I turn the Jewish state into a third world country like Zimbabwe, where one man can rule for 40 years?
Do you see what I mean about the gish galloping once again? It's like, what, how have we got there? He threw so much there that what do you even respond to? This is what I mean. Like, it just throws so much at the wall. What has the tenure of Robert Mugabe, who I assume he's talking about in Zimbabwe, got to do with the price of fish? And why hasn't he talked about Paul Biya or Kagame? Why has he not raised any of those just out of interest? Even though, I don't know. Is there a reason why he's gone specifically for Mugabe there? Oh, I mean, the woman is Zimbabwean. Okay, so maybe that was his point. Maybe that was his point. Okay, that's fair enough. Fair. So he's saying, okay, cool. But what's that got to do with anything? I don't understand what. I don't understand what he's relating here. What's that got to do with the point that she made? How did we get there? I don't. Just. How do you even have a discussion with someone like this?
Where you run away out of that country to come to the United States to study, but you are saying your people have the highest intelligence, then how come you have not been able to create the best centers of learning, universities, schools on your continent so all African kids can go?
So once again, historical illiteracy, because he just mentioned the president who was in power for 40 years. Okay, so he's mentioned the president who was in power for 40 years, but he didn't mention 1998. Land reforms and why they need to take place. He didn't mention the fact that England never gave up anything in Zimbabwe since colonialism, and before the land reforms, it was it 2% of the population who owned 90-something% of the arable land, who essentially owned all of the land, all of the mines. The entire infrastructure was owned by the children, or either directly by the British state or by the children of army generals who were granted land in Rhodesia, okay, before the land reforms that took place in 1998. How are you going to mention Zimbabwe and its despotic dictator leader, how are you going to mention that and not mention its history and the need for the land reforms and why those need to take place? How are you gonna do that? Do you understand? What's he talking about? And yes, Zimbabwe does have a very good education system, but notice how he skipped. He'll just skip over to the parts that he likes. Skip over to the parts that he likes, because he's not trying it. This is what literally is called an argument in bad faith. You know, there's nothing. He's brushing over things and pulling headlines out that he knows are going to catch the ears of his listeners without grounding anything in any kind of reliable facts.
There. Oh, I forgot. She did say that the education the Europeans imposed upon us was a very poor one. And it wasn't good. Now I see that is the only place you want it. Because we see what some of that education has produced. Herself and the other person interviewing her, who was nodding and agreeing in confusion, you can tell.
This is just a wily uncle having a crazy rant. There's not much. There's nothing even to refute at this stage.
2 Africans sitting in a couch with a microphone and a camera. Children.
You're one African sitting in a studio with a camera. What's your point? 2 African, he says it was such disdain, sitting in a couch with a microphone and a camera. How dare they?
Not watching. And the only thing, old glory, the only thing we hold fame to are the 2 things we did not create.
Gonna pause it really quickly. Sorry, guys. A bladder was calling. Oh, Lord. All right. Yeah, so he said the only thing that we could be proud of is the things that we did not create. Okay, I mean, we've already talked about this, you know, so let's carry on.
Anytime you meet kids from other countries, Malay, by the year 2035, every five out of the Malaysian population is in one.
Oh, God. I don't know who caught that because I just saw it was loading there again. But he was just talking about the fact that Malaysia have launched this project where they want all of their population to be very educated, 3 PhDs, 1 master's and 1 degree to every 5 students, which is a huge ask, because that means you want a majority of doctors. But I'm sure he wouldn't turn around and, you know, gloat about the, you know, for instance, the education level of Nigerian diaspora, which is incredibly high, particularly in nations like, you know, America, where I think they're the most educated ethnic minority in America. He wouldn't talk about that. So this is the thing. Once again, he's very selective in what he talks about, because there are nations in Africa which clearly rate education incredibly highly, incredibly highly. And that's and to be honest with you, a lot of them are educated beyond their socio-economic reach. You know, they shouldn't have that level of education given the levels of, you know, wealth inequality, and yet somehow they manage to acquire that. He hasn't shown any kind of, you know, any goodwill towards that development on the African continent and those kind of statistics. He'll only say, I mean, his glazing for Asia, particularly the Far East, is like it's out of this world. He's got this real hard on for for any Far Eastern nation. I'm not saying what Malay, that's just a project. Anyone can come up and just like launch a project and say this is what our intentions are. And here's to say they won't achieve it. But why is he talking about that in juxtaposition to Africans? Because Africans, particularly the groups that he's talking about, aren't the ones who are least likely to be getting qualifications and education. A lot of African nations, qualifications, everyone's got them. It's not a big deal. So I don't understand what his point is here.
As literacy. If a Ghanaian was there, he would say, my people build the pyramids. Malaysia.
When would a Ghanaian say that? When would a Ghanaian say my people built the pyramids? He's just making stuff up at this stage. What's going on, man?
He's talking about 2035. The Ghanaian who was there would say, my people built the pyramids 4,000 years ago.
No, I know a lot of Ghanaians and they could tell you their history. But what are you talking about now? Because now you're talking about, you've gone from saying, what are you proud of historically, to Malaysians, what they plan to do in the future. But no one's going to say, I'm proud of the fact that my nation is planning on doing this. That's moving. Now you're talking about the future. So it's like there's not even consistency within his argument. It just moves backwards through time, forwards through time. He's predicting the future, he's forecasting, and then he's saying, you know, history doesn't count, but then he's saying black people got nothing to be proud of historically. Do you understand how disjointed this argument is? It doesn't land anywhere. This is just a rant of a crazy African man. Literally, he's a crazy uncle at this point.
We speak. Same with Singapore. Everything is going to go green by the year 2035.
So what, man? Now he's just reading the headlines. It's like anything he can find that's positive, anything he can find that's positive about another nation, he's just gonna read it now. Also, did you know that in Alaska, the Eskimos are planning on introducing firewood? Did you also know? Did you also know in Denmark they are planning to, like, mate, come on, like, you're just randomly pulling nations out and talking about all nations have aspirations to do something in the future. Okay, we had blooming Nigerian prime minister or president over in the UK, and they're expanding the ports. Okay, they're expanding so they can export more oil, and they're doing this agreement with UK. I don't think that's a good thing. I think UK is a terrible trading partner, but anyone can pull these headlines out. Like, what exactly is the point of this? It's absolutely ludicrous.
If there was a Nigerian in that room, he would say, and the blacks were Moors who conquered Spain thousands of years ago.
So now he's just trying to shit on actual black history. So he says there's nothing to be proud of. Now just like, I'm just going to shit on everything that I know is black history. He's going to ignore the fact that a Nigerian wouldn't do that. A majority of Nigerians don't even believe that. Okay, a lot of Nigerians don't even know about Moorish history, and I know plenty of Nigerians, so I know that they don't feel a need to discuss those things. Now, me as someone in the diaspora, I love discussing all aspects of African history, just like I was talking about, you know, Great Benin just a moment ago, and I could talk about other great empires in Nigeria, but I could also talk about the Moors. But now he's just trying to just basically just dump on anything. So it's like, if it can be attributed to black people, you dump on it. Okay, oh, you could say this, but If it's something that an Asian has done, he'll see it as being something great. Well, if you saw a Chinese person, they would say we built the Shang dynasty, which is a wonderful thing. But then if an African turns around and says, yeah, and we built Great Benin, Africa would say, Great Benin, what about today? What are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? Why are you worrying about history? Like, he's just like, there's no balance in anything that he's saying here.
Singapore is aiming for 2035. You speak to some countries like Denmark. Poland is saying by the year 2040, they will make sure that they've turned everything in Poland into green, solar, to advance education.
Green, solar. What are we talking about? Poland's turning everything to green, solar. So what? Do you know what nation was doing really, really well? Actually, Libya. And this wasn't a future aspiration. Libya actually had free education for the entire population. Okay? Global, yeah? Any Libyan could study anywhere in the world, and the tab was on the state. Okay? Libyan couples would have allowances, monthly allowances paid into their account directly from the estate to encourage, from the nation to encourage marriage. They had the world's largest irrigation system. They had the world's largest, you're talking about the world's largest solar panel system that was being developed, and it was supposed to transfer cell energy from the sun directly, obviously, to Europe. Okay, all of this stuff was either in production or already being delivered in Libya. Do you know what happened to Libya? Do you know where Libya is now? You dusty old man. Do you know where Libya is now? Libya is now contending with slavery. It now has an enslaved population. Libya is now in civil war. It has one of the worst terror-ridden populations on the planet. It's gone from being right at the very top of the UN's list of human rights and living standards to almost the very bottom in Africa. And you know why that happened? Because of the intervention of your precious European, your precious white man with their white man religion came along with their white man guns, and they killed the leader, and they killed his entire family. They just killed his son, his last son, the other day. So that was the last remaining descendant of Gaddafi, dead. They killed his entire family, unalived his entire family. They massacred the indigenous black taboo population, called them foreign renegades. A lot of them are enslaved now, and the nation's a dump. Okay, white man's heaven, because now the white man can take whatever resources he wants. And you know what you'll do? You know what you'll do? You'll turn around in a few years' time and say, you see, these nations, they can't do anything themselves. Look at them, useless. Because you obviously are probably uneducated about what Libya was just over a decade and a half ago, before the West decided to intervene. Do you understand? So this is the thing I'm saying. There's no way you'll understand that. I wouldn't have that conversation with you because you're too busy glazing these people in your comment section rather than understanding what true history looks like. And Unc is definitely in the palm wine again. Shout out to you, Dregger. Definitely sipping back on the palm wine. You know what I mean? This guy's a ridiculous individual. Ah, dear.
Agriculture, transportation, they will claim their air.
So now, now he's glazing people for just having plans. It just takes a president to stand up and say something now for him to glaze it. As long as they're not black, as long as it's the person who said it is not black, he'll glaze it.
Was a Zimbabwean like her in the room, she would say, Africa is the birthplace of mankind. When other countries are talking about what they are going to achieve tomorrow, we are talking about what we did yesterday.
It's the pure contradiction, the contradictory nature of the stuff that he says. Because on the one hand, he's says we haven't achieved anything. That's how he started. Do you remember the framing of the beginning of this entire diatribe was we haven't achieved anything. There's nothing to be proud of. And then now we've moved on to all we talk about is the things we've achieved, not what we're going to achieve. So within the space of how far are we in? 10 minutes, 11 minutes, he's completely done a 180 on the direction of this discussion, this discourse. To we haven't achieved anything, to we only talk about the things that we've achieved and we don't look into the future. But the initial question was, what should you be proud of? So are you saying that children in those nations should be proud of what their nation plans to do? Is that what you're saying? Not what their nation has done, or not what their nation is currently doing? All over the place.
Always, it is not something we build. You talk to African Americans here, what have you done? Well, we have the best melanin in our skin.
That's not something that you'd ever hear a Black American say. We have the best melanin in our skin. These are absolutely ridiculous.
Why we are darker.
Are you shaking his head there like someone said that to him? Like someone said that to him. Talk to African Americans, they will tell you that they have the best melanin in their skin and they're better because they're darker. You never had anyone ever say that to you. No one's ever said that to you ever in history. You just literally made it up. This is what you call the rant of a stupid old man. He really is a stupid old man. He really is. Like there's no anyway. I'm kind of like we're heading to 2 hour mark, and before we get there, I wanted you guys to just see him and BCD are the same person, by the way. This is just BCD when he gets a little bit older. He'll be exact. You already saw the pictures of him when he was young. They don't look too dissimilar, to be totally honest with you. But anyway, let's go through. I want you to see some of the comments that are in his feed, okay? Because that will give you a view to what he was talking about when he said, I want to respond to some of the comments because I heard them and I like them. This is what this is what Zanu is really working for. This is why he does this. If you're looking for the why does this man hate himself so much? Why is he so derogatory towards Africans? It's because he is being affirmed. Okay, he's being affirmed by his white racist audience. Okay, his alt-right, literally like no quality audience love this tribe that he's serving them. So let's dive. Let's just have a quick look into some of these comments because I think this will be quite enlightening for some of you. So let's just have a quick look into what he's working for here. So let's look at anyone he's liked. You can guarantee that it will say the most toxic and vile things. So let's look at the top. If this all caps, by the way, I'm not going to shout. If all Africans move to Europe and Europeans to Africa, eventually Europe would turn into Africa and Africa into Europe, respectively. Sad but true. So he's arguing for the innate incapability of Black people to achieve anything. And guess who likes that? Zanu. He likes that comment. He thinks that's true. He thinks that's true. He doesn't realize a lot of what Europeans claim as theirs they've actually inherited. But that's another discussion. Let's move on. Hold on. Technically, she is saying that people supposedly less intelligent than us were able to keep us in poverty. This person saying us, by the way, yeah, is clearly not Black. They like to do this a lot. Pretend they're a bunch. Let's pretend that we're Black. That's what they like to do. Technically, she's saying that people supposedly less intelligent than us were able to keep us in poverty for more than half a century. Isn't that worse than being called inferior or outliers? Let's carry on. Nailed it properly around from inferior people. It's not laughter. It's he likes this one, by the way. Look at this next one. It's not laughter. It's Black fatigue. People are getting tired of this. Tired of what? Tired of what? What are you getting tired of? Do you feel oppressed by Black people discussing themselves amongst other Black people? Like, what are you getting tired of? Because I tell you what people truly are tired of. If you just look to the thumbnail that I'm hovering over, crazy white men, crazy evil white men committing genocide. That's something that is actually fatiguing. I'm sure Muslim people, I'm sure Africans are fatigued by crazy white men trying to kill them for their resources. That's truly fatiguing. You know what else is fatiguing? Feeling like you're living in an apartheid nation and being under threat like many black people are, particularly in America, and feeling like their lives are in danger, feeling like they can't call the police because they will be literally hunted down, knowing that you're a second-class citizen. That's fatiguing. You know what's not fatiguing? Black people meeting up and discussing their present. That shouldn't be fatiguing, because you know what? You don't need to be there. I'm not there in your stupid little MAGA meetings. I couldn't care less what you say. The only time you see me reacting or responding to something idiots like Ben Shapiro, or, you know, who's that other idiot who's dead now, Charlie Kirk. The only reason that I'd ever respond to anything that they say is if they say something about my community and about me and about people who are like me. If they're talking amongst themselves about their other, I don't give a crap. I don't care. No one cares what you crazy people talk about. But you know what people are sick of? Things that actually affect their lives. These are things that affect people's lives. Yeah. Periodically, literally every 5 years, a crazy white man from some nation is going to go around and commit a genocide. That's a historical fact. You know what doesn't happen? A crazy black man is going to go to another country and commit a genocide, or a crazy Arab man, or a crazy East Asian man. That doesn't happen. You know what happens? Decade after decade, crazy white men do it. But at least they're not so crazy. They're actually normally just greedy. It's normally greedy white men. Yeah? Periodically deconstructing the world, taking a nation that is functioning and plunging it into hell, killing everybody. Yeah? And yet you have the nerve to talk about being fatigued by black people sitting down and discussing, discussing their, their future or their present, or things that they need to do, or strategizing. That fatigues you. Not your crazy leader who's about to put us into World War III. That's not fatiguing at all. Yeah? No, it's not. These people are literally talking about people getting tired of this. Ask people if they're more tired of black people discussing genetics, which we don't really do very often, or of this frigging psychopath who's about to put us into World War III. I'm sure Zanu will never mention that though. And so I said, I'm sure if he does, he'll never bring race into it. Clear and rational thought is always refreshing and welcome. Thank you, Franck Zanu. They thought that was clear and rational. Was there anything coherent about that entire speech you just gave? When someone is superior, they don't need to tell others. It is obvious. Only those who are not tell everyone else that they are. Irony. Oh, Lord. The irony of that statement. The mental spell is being broken. Thank you, Franck Zanu. What spell is that? What spell is that? These people are literally the biggest victim mentality you'll ever come across. The people who literally have been given everything, who have fought, who literally worked for nothing throughout their lives, are the ones who feel like they are the most put upon, the most persecuted. It's amazing. So anyway, we must protect this man at all costs. So this is the world of Mr. Zanu, and you can see now what the motivation is behind these stupid videos he makes. Now we only got less than halfway through, about 12 minutes into this video, and I think most of you realize that it's not going to go anywhere. And this is the incoherent rant of someone who is politically, socially, and historically illiterate, someone who doesn't have the necessary grounding in the subject that they're discussing to be even worthwhile going through the entire video. And this, in plain speak, is Franck Zanu in a nutshell. Someone who doesn't know enough about the subject that he divulges into, and yet he does know enough to keep his army of racists happy. And what they'll do is they'll reinforce his ignorance. His rants will get more and more ignorant and more incoherent, because he'll plan them less and less, because he realizes whatever tripe he feeds them, they're going to go through it. That's how this grift works, and it's working for him. He's getting views, and the views are converting into income. So there you go. And here's another one just before I go. Here's an ironic thing that he said. So he was having a discussion with someone. He said, you know, I would have 1 million followers. Bear in mind, this guy's only had a channel for about a year, I think it is. He said, I would have 1 million followers if I just said nice things about black people. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't, you fool. Yeah, your entire audience is made up of racist white people. What makes you think you've got the intelligence to build and garner a black audience? You don't know anything about black history. You don't know anything about black presence. You don't have the capability to garner a black audience. Doing this self-hate tripe is the only grift that you could literally do. And no, there's no monetary reward in having a big black audience, or there's very little monetary reward in it. Okay, they're not fanatics like the people who service your channel. Okay, this is the thing. These people are actual idiots, man. So they're tired about us. Once again, so they're tired about us, not the peps. Exactly. They're fatigued with us, not that class, the Pepstein class of people. Okay, which is them when they get money. It's ironic. I spoke about the fact that it's ironic how in almost every other group, as socioeconomic conditions change, the level of criminality tends to fall, aside from a particular group. Okay, that's going to go without saying. Where regardless of which socioeconomic strata you look at, the only thing that will happen is the type of crime that they're committing will change. They won't become less criminalistic. You know, if you look at, the upper classes of any kind of like ethnic minority group, once they kind of like go above a certain level of income, then crime will eventually just like disappear. They just won't commit crimes anymore. These guys, their crimes will just will just inflate, will just magnify substantially, you know. It's absolutely crazy, man. But yeah, there you go. So I think at this point we'll call it a day. I hope you guys have enjoyed the stream. I'm gonna get the heck out of here now because it's nearly midnight and I kind of need to get some rest. I hope you guys have enjoyed the stream. Okay. Yeah, and I think we'll leave it at that. Give a like before you go, guys. Okay, make sure you give a like before you go. Sorry about the choppiness of the stream. I couldn't control the internet, but there you go. Cool. Catch you later, guys. Bruce. No worries, microwave. Maybe get me the next time on that. Appreciate you. Have a fantastic evening all. Peace.